to fly, 621. Enough chat, back to work.
I have never played a game like this before, and odds are you haven't either. Unless, you played Armored Core 1 through 5, which in that case, I don't know what you're doing here, you know what this game is. Regardless, this game is interesting to say the least. It's not bad, but I don't know if I would personally call it great. This review will contain no spoilers, so you're good to watch. Let's get to it. Armored Core 6 is a game that I was initially hesitant to pick up. I have never played any of the previous entries, and everything I was listening to or reading online told me that this game was not your typical From Software game. And that's not a bad thing, but with AC6 being sandwiched between Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, I had to decide if I really wanted to invest time into it, And I will say, the stuff I read online was correct. This is not your typical From Software game that most of us have grown accustomed to. The Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne kind of formula of getting gear, exploring a vast world, fighting really hard bosses and enemies, throwing yourself at them until you get better execution, all that stuff, which I love. This game follows an older formula, which, makes sense. It's the 6th iteration in the franchise, but I picked it up because I'm a sucker for mechs. Gigantic robots fighting with cannons and laser swords? Yeah, why not? That sounds awesome. And so I bought AC6 and started to play, and weirdly enough, I couldn't tell if I liked it. Like, for the first couple hours, I was like, I didn't hate it or even dislike it. I just didn't like it, if that makes sense. Something felt off. It felt like I was missing something, Let me explain some of the game mechanics, that way it'll make what I'm trying to say a lot easier to understand. The way the game works is that you have two main areas of customization with your mech that affect gameplay: the weapons you equip and the parts that make up your mech. You can have up to 4 weapons, 2 in the hand and 2 on the shoulders. Now typically, the hand weapons are like guns, swords, rocket launchers, and the ones on the shoulders are like missile launchers, crowd control, shield damaging weapons, or shields themselves. But the ones on the shoulders can be replaced with 2 other hand weapons, making it like a backpack system. You can switch those weapons throughout the level. You with me so far? Great. The second main area of customization is the mech itself. Different parts lend themselves to different things like faster movement, heavier weight, better energy consumption, more health, etc. Now, you might think that the obvious solution is to build the fastest and healthiest mech out there to avoid all the issues, but in this game, every part you have equipped has some benefits and some negatives. Like a part that is really fast may not provide the most health, or a part that does give health could have high energy consumption, limiting what weapons or other body parts you can have equipped. It's a really cool and in-depth system. Now, these two aspects of the game mesh together and flow pretty well in combat. In combat, your main objective is to reduce the enemy's health to 0, and to do that, you need to get through their shields, stun them, and do massive damage to their main health bar. Sometimes they have 2 shields and a health bar, sometimes they have only 1. Regardless, combat flows like this: stun enemies with your weaponry to break their shield, deal damage to their main health while they're stunned, rinse and repeat. You're also doing this while fighting and dodging enemies' attacks and other enemies in the fight. So it's a pretty active combat scenario. Managing weapon cooldowns, weapon weight, as well as managing your booster cooldowns so that you can avoid other attacks in the fight. It's all pretty cohesive and it feels really fun to do. Okay, those are the main basic concepts you need to understand at the moment. I'll get back to those later. So there I was, practicing and playing the general gameplay loop, and like I was saying earlier, I didn't really get it. Like, I knew what to do, but the game seemed too easy. It just didn't feel like a From Software game, The whole thing about those games is that you've overcome a very difficult scenario. Here, I was just blowing through the first act. It wasn't until I hit the Act 1 boss, Balteus, where I hit my first challenge. At this point, I was kind of close to asking for a refund, to be honest, but I was like, you know what, let me try the first boss, see what happens, and we'll go from there. So I went at him like I normally did, but I couldn't crack the fight. At first I thought, okay, maybe it's my execution, let me tighten that up. And so I did. I practiced and got my execution pretty tight. But even then, I felt like I wasn't doing something right. I felt like the fight was not being played properly. I was running out of ammo, and it was taking forever to break the guy's shields. So if it wasn't my execution that was the issue, the only thing left I could mess with was my mech and weapons. So I went back to the part shop, read through some of the descriptions, and some of them were actually pretty good. So I switched out what I had for what seemed like a better build for the fight. And it actually made a really big difference, but not enough. So I went back and tried again, and again, and again. And soon, I was pretty deep into this loop of trying an idea and going back to the drawing board if it didn't work. And this is where the game clicked for me. I got it now. I get what the game was trying to teach me, and it was pretty unique. In games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, the barrier to completing an area or a boss fight is usually in the player's execution. Sure, you could level up and try to get stronger, but that can only take you so far. If you have a misstep here, take a wrong consumable there, attack at the wrong time, all of those things will make you lose the fight. So, you practice those things. You get better by throwing yourself at the boss and learning how to beat them, learning their patterns, XYZ, all that kind of stuff, which is awesome, and it is present here, but not to the same extent. Instead, for this game, the progression is tied to how much you are willing to experiment with. Sure, you could beat the boss or level with the current mech you have, but you could also make it way easier on yourself by changing it up completely. In most games, upgrades are vertical. You go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 and so on and so forth, making your weapon or your armor stronger. In AC6, the new parts you buy are not necessarily vertical upgrades, they're more horizontal. For example, there was a laser sword I had at first and I really liked it. I could slash with it twice before it went on cooldown and had a small to medium range. But then, after a couple levels, the game introduced a new sword into the shop. It did more damage and had a lot more range, but it could only slash once and the cooldown was a lot longer before I could use it again, and it consumed more energy on my overall build. So I had to decide how I wanted to fight this boss and if the rest of my build would complement that idea, and if it didn't, then I had to make a mech that did. And honestly, it's a really neat concept gameplay wise, because like instead of looking at every fight as just a fight, now you kind of have to look at it as like a puzzle. The optimal solution is in your hands, you just have to put it together yourself. Instead of a slow moving mech, maybe now you just need a quick agile one to get on the guy's lasers, so you build that out, and now you find out you wreck shop against this boss. And for a while, this was an awesome gameplay loop. Fighting and piloting the mech feels fantastic and feels like you think it should feel. A big hulking mech that is made to take a lot of hits feels like the tank it is. A mech built to speed around its enemies does exactly that. FromSoft nailed the idea of making your build feel exactly like what you're looking for, provided you built it correctly, of course. Combat is really fun, and like if you're looking for a game that lets you zoom around as a mech and take out other mechs, this game is it for you. It's really cool the fact that you can say, I want a laser sword and a giant cannon and a railgun all on my mech to take out the enemy in this specific way, and I want to look like a cool anime protagonist, and bam, the game just lets you do that. Of course, you have to abide by the rules it sets, but you can generally do most cool shit in this game. As for visual customization, the game has plenty of options for you. They have preset colors, you can make your own colors, you can download colors from online. Basically, you can make a lot of stuff here. And the game looks fantastic. All the enemy designs are dope to look at, and the amount of customization you get on your mech is awesome. It's like the Saturday afternoon takes painting your little models. Same thing here. You can do that. You can spend hours in making your mech look really sick. I know I did. AC6 allows for a lot of weapons to be in this game, and you're unlocking them even in New Game Plus. They have almost every weapon you can think of for a mech. Laser swords, giant pile drivers, rocket launchers, railguns, so be sure to try them all. If you don't like them, you can always sell it back to the shop, but I guarantee you, they're very fun to use and you'll find something you like. The game also has a practice mode, and there's an arena combat mode with other NPC mechs you can find throughout the game. And the more you play, the more fights you unlock, all of which get progressively more difficult. It's fun and a really cool way to see what you could potentially build for yourself. If you see a mech with a really cool build, rest assured you can most likely build that for yourself as well. Fighting the bosses in this game also felt really good for a while. They range from giant robots to the same size enemies that are able to do everything you can do. Sometimes while you're fighting the boss, additional enemies show up, so you need to be on your toes to dodge, attack, and take out everyone. You can also 1v1 a friend on the same system as you. It works like a private match system, so you make a room, give them the code, they can join, and you guys can fight against each other. I can't deny, the combat in this game is fun. And if you want a mech game, like I said before, this is it for you. AC6 really nails down what it feels like to be a mech pilot fighting other mechs. And all that is fine and dandy, but there are aspects of the game that do seem a little off to me. Like I mentioned before, I've never played an AC game, so I don't know if this is a normal thing for these games. If it is, let me know. Basically, all of the levels in this game feel extremely short. Like, there was one I felt that was a full flushed out level to me, but other than that, they all felt so short. The flow felt weird, like it was very arcadey in terms of level design, and I know that might be some other people's cup of tea, but for me, I just didn't vibe with it. I just wish the game had longer levels. Like for me, if I'm making a mech and I'm making it very specific and I'm like, okay, I can't wait to get out here, and I get out there, but the mission is over in literally less than a minute, then I'm like, okay, then why did I spend all this time designing this mech for a challenge that's not even there, you know? Like, okay, I would be playing a mission and the mission says you need to go blow up this generator. You'll meet resistance on the way. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go fight small enemies on the way there, nothing too crazy, and then I blow it up and I'm like, okay, now the boss fight, the resistance is gonna come. No, the game just kind of is like, all right, mission's done. And it kept doing this for a lot of the missions, if not all. And it got a bit old after Act 2. Imagine 5 acts of this. And of course, the more you go into the game, the harder it gets. But this leads into another problem, and probably the main problem I have with the game. If you can crack the code on a good mech build, there will be huge swaths of the game that you're just speeding through. And I'm talking like this is for both early and late game. It's not like it's an early game problem. This is a full game problem that I ran into. For example, I made myself a tank mech build that was super fun. I could decimate basic enemies no problem and I felt super unstoppable. But then I hit boss fights with that same build and they were not a challenge at all. And this isn't me bragging. It's more so I was surprised at how easy the game was since I cracked the code. Like another AC showed up and your co-pilot or whatever was like, oh my god, that's Bingus McDingle, the destroyer of Rubicon. And then Bingus would have some really cool line about how he's going to destroy me and my entire bloodline.
Do you read me, Raven? I've identified the target. That's the mercenary who took your name. Let's see how far they can fly. On borrowed wings.
Only to die within literally a minute. Like, and that's not an exaggeration. I timed it. Like, actually, it was literally he comes in, says his line, and then the fight starts, and I just decimate him. It was weird. I was like, what is this? I thought this guy was supposed to be like a really big challenge. But no, because I made a really good build, it just eliminates any and all challenge in the game. This was a problem up until the final boss of the game. Like, when I say the final boss took me 30 seconds to beat, that is not an exaggeration. Because my build was so good, I was able to destroy him within 30 seconds. And it wasn't like a satisfying destruction either. It was just like, okay, like, that was nothing. I would like more, please, you know? The difficulty scaling in this game is very goofy, and I don't really understand why it's built this way. Sure, there are the occasional tough enemies, but like I said, if you crack the code to a good build, then you can zoom past everything that this game tries to make you fight. Literally, there was like no need for me to fight them because it would be over in 2 seconds. And I do understand and sympathize because this is something that is inherently hard to balance. If the player is allowed somewhat limitless customization, you should be rewarded for making the best mech you can come up with. And to an extent, I agree. But like, if the solution I make is so good, it makes the rest of the game super easy and even eliminates the need to customize your mech ever again, maybe there needs to be some sort of tuning somewhere. And I'm not a game designer, so I don't know what the proper solution is, but I do think it affected my enjoyment of the game. Like the final boss, again, it took less than a minute. It kind of makes the whole weight of the final encounter lose any luster it had. The game does get a little harder in New Game Plus, but not enough to make me want to play all the way through again. As for the story, it's cool. Like, there's like some liberation thing going on in the background. All the main information is given to you via Metal Gear Solid type voice communicator cutscenes, and there are some cool in-engine cutscenes which I really enjoyed, but like I said, the moment is then ruined by a non-boss fight. Story didn't really sway me one way or another, it was kind of there, and that's all I have to say about it. Oh, and you also have 3 endings, 2 of which you can get through your first playthrough by choosing to do some missions. If you do one, the other is lost to you and you're on your way to a certain ending. But if you want the true ending, you actually have to play through the game twice. I'm not sure why it's built that way, but that seems like an older Armored Core thing that I personally didn't really care for. I won't say it's bad though, because that's more content being introduced in New Game Plus, and that's always great. It just wasn't interesting enough for me to pursue it. The game, without replaying it, is about 30 hours long, which for me felt a little short for a $60 game, but to each their own. I still stand by what I said earlier. This game's design and gameplay loop conceptually feel really cool. Building out that mech and tackling each fight with a new solution felt in-depth and really fun when executed properly. Piloting the mech itself felt really fantastic, and creating your ideal mech is something you can very easily do. I love the options this game gives for mech customization. It feels really nice, feels really robust, and it feels like something I personally have never seen before. The idea of me going into a level, struggling, saying, okay, let me see what else I can come up with, and coming back into the level with a new mech is something that's really cool, and honestly, I applaud them for executing it in the way that they did. Unfortunately, the short level design and easy to play game make me feel like this game may not be worth the full price tag. Again, this game is not a bad game, but this game can be broken pretty easily, and with the lack of a challenge, I personally struggle to stay engaged in the narrative or the fight itself. But if you're looking for something that's a simple mech customization and like excursion kind of game, go for it. This game might be for you. It's really fun and the combat is good. But again, be wary of making something that's too overpowered, because you will make the game too easy for yourself. If you're looking for a 30 to 40 hour game with fun combat, in-depth customization, built-in replayability, then this game might be for you. For me, however, I don't think I would put this on any person's must-play list. I'm giving Armored Core 6: The Fire's Rubicon a 7 out of 10. An experience that fires you up and masters the mech, just be sure not to crash and burn. I would also say it's probably best if you wait for a sale. I don't think it had enough engaging content to justify a fully priced release. I would personally say wait for it to be $35 to $40. Again, not a bad game, but the flaws make it really hard to enjoy at times, unfortunately. It just became way too easy and way too broken. If you're looking for a mech game and that's it, then I think you should give this one a try. It's a bit older in terms of design, but that works for some people. I think I'm finding I prefer newer games with a bit more fleshed out design, but I know everyone likes the game a certain way, so more power to you. I'm itching to get back into Baldur's Gate 3, but Starfield also just came out and I'm actually really enjoying that as well. Check out my review for Baldur's Gate if you haven't. I gave it Game of the Year and I'll stand by that decision still. I'm so excited to see what the Game Awards will bring for announcements. I want to see Elden Ring DLC, but I've also heard the yearly rumor of the Bloodborne remake coming out, so, whatever the case is, FromSoft has something coming out. Thanks for watching and have a good one.